Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Alicia Edwards. Coming up tonight, the PM apologises. Liz Truss told MPs, "I am sorry and I have made mistakes." More from PMQs on the way. With London rent hitting a record high, perhaps no surprise, more than a quarter of young renters in the capital say they're considering leaving the city within the next year. We'll have more on those findings. An update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, The Rock launches his latest blockbuster in the capital. We'll hear from him. And a new album launching the best of the UK's jazz and soul music. We've been at the launch. All of that on the way before 7 o'clock. But first this evening, Zara Alina was attacked after she was dragged into a driveway in Cranbrook Road while walking home from a night out in East London. The Old Bailey heard today. Jordan McSweeney is facing charges of murder, attempted rape and robbery and failed to attend a plea hearing at the Old Bailey, which was adjourned to Monday. The trial will start at the Old Bailey on the 5th of December. The PM apologised again today. Liz Truss told MPs, "I am sorry and I have made mistakes," as she faced Prime Minister's questions for the first time since the mini-budget U-turn. One Labour MP asked why Kwasi Kwarteng lost his job as Chancellor rather than Truss. Here's what she had to say.
Mr. Speaker, I have been very clear that I am sorry and that I have made mistakes. But the right thing to do in those circumstances is to make changes, which I've made, and to get on with the job and deliver for the British people. And Mr. Speaker, we've delivered the energy price guarantee, we've helped people this winter, and I will continue to do that.
There we are, the Prime Minister there. Well, Sir Keir Starmer was quick to take a chance to make a joke, questioning her leadership.
A book is being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently, it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been in office for just under 2 months, and I have delivered the energy price guarantee, making sure that people aren't paying £6,000 bills this winter. I've reversed the national insurance increase, and I've also taken steps, and we will be taking steps, to crack down on the militant unions. Now, what, Mr. Speaker? I think, Mr. Speaker, that is more of a record of action than the honourable gentleman in his 2.5 years in the job.
There we are. Well, after that PMQs, Suella Braverman departed as Home Secretary. She was in the role for just 43 days, appointed by Prime Minister Liz Truss. Also in the Commons today, the Transport Secretary has said the government has axed its plan to introduce the Transport Bill during the current parliamentary session. It included the creation of a new body called Great British Railways to oversee the rail sector.
A big transport bill, no. The challenges of things like the energy legislation that we've got to bring in and various others has meant that we have lost the opportunity to have that in this third session. What we are continuing to pitch for will be what I would call a narrow bill around the future transport technologies, the legislation around things like e-scooters, some of those, a variety, sort of quite a broad mix of regulatory changes we need to bring in, to my point about being able to help the private sector get on and invest in those areas. So that's what we're working on with number 10 at the moment.
Now, some other stories from the capital today. A man who imported 4 guns from the US to the UK has been given more than 6 years in jail. Darnell Matthews from Wembley pleaded guilty to the importation of 4 firearms and 1 count of possession of a knife in August, after police found a handgun loaded with 5 bullets at an address connected to him. With the average rental cost reaching an eye-watering £553 a week, More than a quarter of young renters in London say they're now considering leaving the city within the next year. That's according to a new poll of more than 1,025 to 45-year-old Londoners from Pocket Living. This figure increased by 11% in a year since the affordable housing developer last undertook a poll. Well, the company's CEO, Mark Vlessing, has been taking me through the findings.
There's always the same kind of percentage of people within that group of renters who say, yeah, I can't make London work anymore. And it typically is somewhere around sort of 15%, 16% year in, year out. What's fascinating is that in the last 12, 18 months, it's really shot up. So to get to a quarter of London renters saying, I don't think I can stay in London anymore, I don't think I can make this work. It's an 11% increase on what it was last year. It's the biggest increase we've seen. It's an extremely worrying sign for, frankly, the economic and social health of London. For an economy to grow in the Western world, frankly, in any open market, you need a buoyant housing market. Because when you add up all the components that make up the housing market, whether it's new housing or old housing, the cost of materials, labour, service costs, architects, solicitors, financing costs, it makes up a huge percentage of the GDP of a country. Some economists reckon that housing as an activity, as a sector, if you add up all the bits, makes up as much as 20% of the GDP of a country. So it stands to reason that if your housing economy is flat and not growing, you can't grow your overall economy. It becomes a sort of vicious circle, doesn't it? You can't get on the housing ladder, so will you stay in London? You can't get on the housing ladder, so you can't start a family. The other bits of our research, which are fascinating, is that over 60% argue that their mental health and their well-being is improved once they get on the housing ladder. So there is clearly a real sense of lack of security that comes with, asking people to share and to live in suboptimal conditions throughout their 20s and early 30s, not being able to get married, not being able to have children, not being able to make a commitment to the city. It has to stop. A world city like London has to ask itself, who is it there for? It's a privileged place. We all know that. It's an extraordinary thing to have a world city in your country. How can it be fairly shared between the haves and the have-nots and the people in the middle? And at the moment, there is, I would say, to some degree, a breakdown of communication between City Hall and Whitehall. I think the Mayor of London is doing his very best to address all of these needs.
There we are, Mark Vlessing there. Now, some other stories from the capital. A high-value burglary in North London saw more than 20 items of jewellery stolen from a home break-in. The police are appealing for anyone with information to come forward. These are 3 of the rings which were taken in the raid. The break-in took place between 11 a.m. on Friday the 16th of September and 2 a.m. the following morning. Now, in a star-studded ceremony in the capital, Londoner Little Simz picked up this year's Mercury Prize last night. The 28-year-old British artist won for her 4th studio album called Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. Speaking at the Hammersmith Apollo, she said she was very overwhelmed and grateful to receive the honour, paying tribute to the other nominees who included Self-Esteem, Wet Leg, Harry Styles and Sam Fender. Right, time for a quick check on the weather now. A chance of some heavy, thundery showers moving up from the south tonight that may linger in places throughout the morning tomorrow. These clearing to sunny spells later on. Looking ahead to Friday, it will continue to be rather wet with a band of thundery rain moving eastwards and falling heavy at times. Patchy cloud on Saturday, likely to be drier though, and temperatures in the high teens across the next few days. Temperatures overnight though staying mild as well, still in the mid to low teens at their very lowest. Right, just before the break. Last night saw another blockbuster have its premiere in the capital with none other than The Rock promoting his latest movie. Dwayne Johnson and the cast of Black Adam attended the premiere of the latest DC film, which sees The Rock playing the anti-hero Teth Adam. Well, let's hear from him.
It feels awesome. We made a great movie. That was the most important thing. We wanted to create a movie that was appealing globally to people, and we wanted to kind of turn the superhero genre on its head a little bit with creating an anti-hero with a lot of edge, and we also wanted to usher in a new era of the DC universe. The thing I liked the most was every day putting on the costume, because it was just so cool, man. And you come to work every day, you're living a dream, like you're a little kid. I mean, the work is hard, but certainly well worth it. The worst thing about making the movie, I mean, there was no worst thing about making the movie. So, I mean, that's the truth.
There we go, Dwayne Johnson there. Few stars causing quite as much commotion in the capital as The Rock. Right, it's time for a break now, but coming up, nearly a third of women wait more than 3 months from first visiting their GP for a diagnosis of ovarian cancer. We'll hear more.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
welcome back. Time now for a look at some other stories affecting Londoners today. According to criminal justice experts, an official rating system for social media platforms to indicate how safe they are for children needs to be introduced. In a bid to better protect young people online, the study from Crest Advisory recommends that alongside the rating system, compulsory age verification through a national system should be introduced, as should an alert system run by a regulator that would notify parents and others about threats online. The report says the rating system would help parents and carers make more informed decisions about whether to allow children access to certain websites. The managing director of a childcare business has said diversity in foster care is needed as it gives children someone to identify with, as she reflected fondly on having foster siblings growing up herself. The London-based business helps to find homes for children and assists in parent and child rehabilitation through the foster system. Chido Po is managing director of Banya Family Placement and says that representation is important in the industry because it gives children somebody with similar experiences to them to identify with. And Simon Cowell has moved on to a new venture pairing some of music's biggest songwriters and producers with social media stars and creatives. His latest endeavour is giving TikTok creators worldwide access to exclusive music stems, inviting them to produce their own versions of a brand new song written by prolific hitmakers. The project, led by Swedish mega hit producer Max Martin, has been done in the hope to create a new evolution of musical collaboration, curation and artist discovery. Now, a new book discusses the idea of trust and argues that it is waning in the workplace in particular, which filters through to other aspects of life. A recent survey discovered that just about 30% of the UK's employees trust their CEOs much less than a decade ago. Business author Jeff Hudson-Searle commissioned the survey and argues that if we're to survive a cost of living nightmare in a post-Brexit, post-pandemic world, we need to tackle this issue head-on. Well, Helena spoke to Jeff about his new book, The Trust Paradigm.
So the connection that people have with their CEO is diminishing. The employee engagement, diminishing. The ability to actually apply things like effective listening, empathy, which is a huge subject now, leads to understanding. If a leader wants to be credible, and lead purpose within an organisation, he has to do all of that and communicate more effectively to the employee so that we can build trust. And trust we trust. The world is fragmented right now because we're very transactional. And we're not thinking the human relationship and what glue is required in order to consummate that and make it more effective in terms of both from a business perspective, but also more importantly, from a performance perspective.
And then, there's been a significant drop in trust over the last generation.
Yeah, 100%.
And do you think that this reflects wider public attitudes? Now, look, we saw trust in government fall with Boris Johnson and Partygate, and here in London, a lot of women especially don't really trust the Metropolitan Police anymore after a series of scandals. Does this survey reflect wider public attitudes, or is it a different factor?
No, 100%. You're really on point with this. So the research that I've carried out in the last 30 years has shown a distinctive diminishing of public attitude towards trust. So if we look at trust from a societal perspective, I believe that there's a lack of trust in government, one, and geopolitically, and some of the decisions that are being made are not in the people's interest. I believe in business we've got a horrendous situation, and I think that we've got to go back to some basics. I've got to say that culture I mentioned just earlier, but I think it's wider than that. I think we've got to get back to design thinking, innovation, people at the centre, company culture, trust, and start to build organisations that truly put people at the centre, because we're missing things like we might be addressing equality and diversity from a board perspective, right? But we're not addressing certain things like inclusion. London is, without question, the most connected city in the world. Proud to be a part of London, but it's also the most disconnected city when you start to think about the relationship. So I think, yes, and I think I want to say one more thing. When I say societal, I also say about family life and husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever generic formula that might turn out to be. We are lacking trust at home. And so if we look to leadership, we look to government to lead. And if we're not having that sense of leadership from government, we're hardly going to have that looking in the business arena. And certainly as far as home concerned, all you're going to see is this whole trust fragmentation, which I'm afraid to say is not going to work in any economy.
Absolutely. Well, in your book, which is out at the end of this month, you give lessons to help business leaders restore trust. Can you give us any examples of what we might find in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book's, I'm very proud of the book. The trust paradigm has been basically written on the basis that we need to start restoring trust into societal. So we've started to examine, and we've through 30 years of my business, working in 120 international countries around the world, doing major large change programs and executive board posts, we've come together to give people the right lessons. So every chapter within the book has got a golden nugget, so to speak, where people can actually adapt and apply that to their own life. Now, everyone's different. Everyone's unique. We're all extraordinary. But we've tried to address all of the behaviours, cognitive as well as practical lessons that people can actually apply. So actually, we want it for them to be their go-to book. We want it for them to actually get positive influences from the book which can actually change life. I think we're entering a trust era, if I can say that. I think that the next 10 years, as the good Tom Peters said, trust, technology is not the issue of the decade, but trust is. And I think that we're entering a trust era. And I think that the ratifications and the changes that we're seeing in life, and which we've addressed in the book, are clearly very important for each and every one of us, irrespective of who we are, or what we represent, whether government, business, or even family life at home. The book serves its purpose, and it's no better time than this book needs to be published. But this book needs to be published to the world, and there is no doubt in my mind that this book will help support, and to be a part of that is greatness as far as I'm concerned. So
there we are, Jeff Hudson-Searle there chatting to Helena, and the trust paradigm is out on the 28th of October. Now, new research shows nearly a third of women will have to wait more than 3 months from first visiting their GP for a diagnosis of ovarian cancer. That's according to data from charity Target Ovarian Cancer, which surveyed GPs, women with a diagnosis and women from the general public across the country. Rachel Downing is the director of study at the charity, and she told me more, as well as the signs women should be aware of.
So we found that just 1 in 5 women know the symptom of bloating, which is a really key symptom of ovarian cancer. So that's incredibly worrying that people aren't knowing that that is something they might need to get checked out. We found that over a quarter of women are making 3 or more visits to their GP before they're being referred for tests. And we also found that 54% of women who've been diagnosed were never asked about the impact on their mental health during their treatment, which just goes to show that the support isn't there.
What are the symptoms? You mentioned about bloating there, but what are some of the symptoms that people should be aware of that maybe that would pass them by?
So there are 4 symptoms to be on the lookout for. The first is bloating, and that's persistent bloating, so it's not bloating that comes and goes. The second is tummy or abdominal pain. There's feeling full or difficulty eating, and then there's needing to wee more often or more urgently. And so if those are new for you and they're happening quite frequently, you need to go and see your GP.
You say there about the significant increase in the late diagnosis of ovarian cancer. What can be done to improve this? Because GPs are presumably doing their best.
They are, and we know that no GP wants to miss a diagnosis of ovarian cancer. And there are 3 things that we think can be done to improve this. The first is nationwide government-backed symptoms awareness campaigns, so those symptoms are out there and everyone's getting educated on them. The second is quicker access to diagnostic tests. We know that women are waiting to have the tests, and then we know that GPs are waiting to get those results back. And the third is making sure that GPs are trained and clued up on the symptoms of ovarian cancer. So we at Target Ovarian Cancer have some training modules for them, and we need every GP to take those training modules so they know what to look out for.
Speaking of that training, some of your research found that 14% of women were not told their diagnosis in private. How crucial is that moment where you're given that diagnosis and find out?
So that quite often happens when people are admitted as an emergency. So when their symptoms are so bad, they go to hospital, or they're diagnosed after being investigated for another condition, which is why it's so important that everyone is diagnosed through their GP, because then they are having access to the right tests and they're going to get that right diagnosis for them.
There we are, Rachel Downing there from Target Ovarian Cancer, and you can find out more about their charity online. You're watching London Live News with Alicia Edwards. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, as alcohol-related deaths are on the rise, Londoners are encouraged to join in Sober October.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
there, welcome back. A reminder of our main story this evening. Zara Alina was attacked after she was dragged into a driveway in Cranbrook Road while walking home from a night out in East London, the Old Bailey heard today. Jordan McSweeney is facing charges of murder, attempted rape and robbery and failed to attend a plea hearing, which was adjourned to Monday. The trial will start at the Old Bailey on the 5th of December. The PM apologised again today. Liz Truss told MPs, "I am sorry and I have made mistakes," as she faced Prime Minister's questions for the first time since the mini-budget U-turn. One Labour MP asked why Kwasi Kwarteng lost his job as Chancellor rather than Truss. Here's what she had to say.
Mr. Speaker, I have been very clear that I am sorry and that I have made mistakes. But the right thing to do in those circumstances is to make changes, which I've made, and to get on with the job and deliver for the British people. And Mr. Speaker, we've delivered the energy price guarantee, we've helped people this winter, and I will continue to do that.
There we are, the Prime Minister there. Well, Sir Keir Starmer was quick to take a chance to make a joke, questioning her leadership.
A book is being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently, it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been in office for just under 2 months, and I have delivered the energy price guarantee, making sure that people aren't paying £6,000 bills this winter. I've reversed the national insurance increase, and I've also taken steps, and we will be taking steps, to crack down on the militant unions. Now, what, Mr. Speaker? I think, Mr. Speaker, that is more of a record of action than the honourable gentleman in his 2.5 years in the job.
There we are. Well, after that PMQs, Suella Braverman departed as Home Secretary. She was in the role for just 43 days, appointed by Prime Minister Liz Truss. Also in the Commons today, the Transport Secretary has said the government has axed its plan to introduce the Transport Bill during the current parliamentary session. It included the creation of a new body called Great British Railways to oversee the rail sector.
A big transport bill, no. The challenges of things like the energy legislation that we've got to bring in and various others has meant that we have lost the opportunity to have that in this third session. What we are continuing to pitch for will be what I would call a narrow bill around the future transport technologies, the legislation around things like e-scooters, some of those, a variety, sort of quite a broad mix of regulatory changes we need to bring in, to my point about being able to help the private sector get on and invest in those areas.
Now, some other stories from the capital today. A man who imported 4 guns from the US to the UK has been given more than 6 years in jail. Darnell Matthews from Wembley pleaded guilty to the importation of 4 firearms and 1 count of possession of a knife in August, after police found a handgun loaded with 5 bullets at an address connected to him. Now, some other stories from the capital. A high-value burglary in North London saw more than 20 items of jewellery stolen from a home break-in. The police are appealing for anyone with information to come forward. These are 3 of the rings which were taken in the raid. The break-in took place between 11 a.m. on Friday the 16th of September and 2 a.m. the following morning. Now, in a star-studded ceremony in the capital, Londoner Little Simz picked up this year's Mercury Prize last night. The 28-year-old British artist won for her 4th studio album called Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. Speaking at the Hammersmith Apollo, she said she was very overwhelmed and grateful to receive the honour, paying tribute to the other nominees, who included Self-Esteem, Wet Leg, Harry Styles and Sam Fender. Now, Sober October has come round again, and the latest figures from the ONS reveal that alcohol-related mortality rates are on the rise. Chris Hill from Bexley and founder of Beat My Addiction spoke to Hebe about his story going sober and how he's helping others across the capital beat their addictions ever since.
I started up our company, Beat My Addictions, back in, it was 2016. What happened is I lost my twin brother to a drug overdose, which absolutely destroyed my life. I'd had a history of drink and drug abuse for over 20 years, but I managed to get myself out. But then when I lost my brother, I realized that I needed to do something. So I wrote a book. I shared my story and my brother's story. It was called Get Your Life Back. And then, I wrote an addiction program. We set up some support groups and we started to help people. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And yeah, I mean, it's not just London. I mean, we've been helping people across the country and across the world. I mean, now we have this amazing thing called Zoom. We're able to educate, because this is really what I do, is about educating people to understanding the psychology of addiction. I know there's a physical need to serve something, but I would say 95% is a psychological issue. And we're trying to educate people to that so that then they can make choices, better choices for themselves and for their families and stuff like that.
So that leads me on to my next question, which is what can the government, what can the education system do better to lower the chances of someone growing up and becoming dependent on alcohol or drugs or cigarettes?
Well, I mean, it really just comes down to is education. The problem that you've got with government, NHS, there's some really powerful lobbyists that don't want people to stop. If you think about the revenue from the alcohol industry, the pharmaceutical industry, even like the sugar, the food industry, the nicotine industry, the gambling industry, these are very powerful lobbyists that sit in government. And the revenue that comes back to government is so immense that the social problems are such a small amount of the money that the government are making. So they're not really set to demonise any of this. What we need is a campaign that would start in school level, maybe from the age of 8, 9 and 10, about substances and the side effects of these substances. So if we talk about alcohol, it would be an education around the side effects of alcohol is depression. Alcohol is a depressant, and we really need to help people understand what that means. If we've done an educational program on cannabis, there's all these reports now that it's health beneficial and everything else. But when you put the THC to the drug, it causes psychosis. So we've got people that are suffering with psychosis from a very young age. It would be education around ketamine. Ketamine is a drug that's being, sought, very highly now, a lot from the younger, generation. But the cause and effect of that is that, we've got kids now, young adults with bowel sizes of an 8-year-old, so they can't hold, the bladder can't hold anything. So, that leads on to colostomy bags, bowel transplants. So it's actually to start an education around the side effects of drink, drugs, cannabis, ketamine, balloons, the laughing gas, which is blowing out their lungs. It's to try and help them before they enter into this. And then also an education into a solution that if you have started into this is the route out, because a lot of addiction is psychological. Maybe 95%, once you start putting drugs in, the mind associates certain behaviors. So it's about teaching, people about, the mind and the body, emotion, feeling, thought, of being independent of us consciously. And it's a bit like mindfulness. How can you start to manage thoughts that are telling you to do something when you don't actually have to do it? So it would be more an education campaign around mind and body, consequences, side effects, and life stories. Get people to share their life stories in and around this.
There we are, Chris Hill there. You can find out more information on beatmyaddiction.com. It's time for a break now, but don't go anywhere, because coming up, the new album celebrating the best of the UK's jazz, soul and R&B scene. We went down to the launch.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching London Live News at 6. Now, a major new exhibition has launched at Canary Wharf's Museum of London Docklands, looking at the history of public executions in the capital. From the first recorded instance in 1196, when a man nicknamed William with the Long Beard was hung, drawn and quartered, all the way through to the city's last public killing in 1868. The display shares stories and objects of those who were either executed or witnessed these events. Well, Paul's been speaking to curator Beverly Cook to find out more.
The exhibition really looks at public punishment over a 700-year period from 1196 to 1868 and reveals how the practice of public executions became embedded in society, in London's landscape, even its economy, and how it became a collective experience for Londoners during that period.
Public executions were prominent in London, across the UK. How long were these going on for? Why was this such a big part of the country's history?
Well, our story starts in 1196 because that was the first recorded execution at Tyburn, which of course became the main execution site for the country, really, not just for London. But of course, executions were happening before then. London was known as the bloodiest city of Europe, often referred to as the City of Gallows, and more public executions happened in London than anywhere else in the country. Very high-profile crimes or murders or even rebellions, the perpetrators of those crimes were often brought down to London for their trial and execution.
And over the course of 600, 700 years, however long executions were taking place in London, what crimes were punishable by public execution? Did that change generally over the course of those years?
It changed rapidly over the period. From the earlier period, like the medieval period, through to really sort of the early years of the 18th century, you see that the state is under threat quite often. So you see more arrests for things like rioting, rebellions. And also, of course, during the Reformation period, a lot of people were executed for heresy, either because they were Catholic or because they were Protestant, depending on who was the monarch at the time. And then over time, you see that as we became a more urban environment and property became more important to people and had a higher value, you see that people were being executed for a range of crimes against property. And then, of course, by the 19th century, where we had a much more urban population, you see that people were more likely to be executed for things like crime and violence against the person. By the end of the 18th century, there were over 200 crimes for which you could be condemned to death.
Does this history of executions weave its way into the historical fabric of the city today? Has it shaped our tourism?
I think one of the reasons for bringing this subject matter to the public and a broader public is because a lot of people are not aware of our history of public punishment. And what we've tried to do in our exhibition is to reveal where and how people were executed throughout the city in terms of the impact on our landscape, both then and today. I think people might have heard of Tyburn and Newgate, but they might not be aware of after people were executed, many of their bodies were gibbeted, and they were placed on very high gibbets in cages in places like Wimbledon Common and Hounslow Heath. And I am sure that many people would not be aware of that as they take their daily walks in those areas.
The exhibition it's always going to cover, who was executed and where those took place, but also, do you tap into the impact of these executions on the London public? And, I imagine some people were debating the ethics of these towards the end of this time.
Obviously, we think of the people who came to watch public executions, and we have to make a distinction between those that we refer to as the mob the London mob, you know, that would have turned up for anything or viewed anything that was slightly grisly or whatever. And the crowd that were much more mixed. And a lot of people went to view public executions for a lot of different reasons. And one of the reasons is why public executions did decline is this idea that actually did they brutalise the people who viewed them rather than put fear in them? Was public execution a deterrent? And it became quite clear that it was no longer, if it ever had been, a deterrent to crime.
There we are. Executions is on display at the Museum of London Docklands until April next year. Plenty of time to go and visit. Now, finally, some music for this evening. An iconic indie music venue in London has played host to the launch of a new album celebrating the best of the UK's jazz, soul and R&B scene, arriving off the back of the widespread international success of the first volume, which topped jazz charts around the globe. Blue Note Reimagined 2 was launched by the record label Blue Note Records. The event at Vinyl Shop and event venue Rough Trade in Shoreditch celebrated the album, which shines a light on diverse young Londoners doing something a bit different in the genre. Well, we went down to the event and spoke to some of the artists.
Tonight we are at Rough Trade in East London, and myself and Theon Cross, we are performing our cover from the Blue Note Reimagined album.
Blue Note Reimagined came out on Friday. It features myself and many other emerging great artists from the London scene.
So the concept behind Blue Note Reimagined is taking an original and kind of, you know, making it your own. So creating a song and kind of adding your signature sound to it. So the song that I reimagined was Feel Like Making Love by Marlena Shaw.
That's the time now. I feel like making love, love. That's the time. I feel like making love to you.
It's a song that I've always loved. My mum loves it. I think it was a compilation of Marlena Shaw, and I remember hearing it for the first time thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Then I did some more, you know, discovery on her, and I just loved how she just sang so easy on the song. I thought I have to do my own version of it just to show my appreciation of how much I love the song.
When I was asked to be a part of this project, I really had a difficult time thinking about who to choose, and eventually I came around to Thelonious Monk because I've always loved his compositions. I love how much of an individual he is. The song I chose to cover is Epistrophe by Thelonious Monk. It was about choosing someone who is so much of themselves I could also interpret them and be myself. I guess for me it was first about gravitating to the part of the song that resonated for me first, which for me was the bass line. It's got such an anthemic bass line, and for me as a bass player, that's what I gravitated to. If Thelonious Monk could hear my reimagining of his piece, I hope he would like it. I hope he would think that I was true to his own composition, but can hear my individuality through it.
Being in London as an artist, it's a melting pot, and it helps to shape your sound. You know, there's a jazz scene that's booming at the moment. I think it's giving people identity, giving people a voice as well. And you hear it in people's music because we're exposed to so much. Our palette, foods, fashion, clothing, we're exposed to so much. It just seeps out in your music.
London has definitely influenced the way the piece has turned out. I think a lot of the music that I love is rap influenced and also features a lot of kind of digital sounds and things like grime, like Dirty Simps and things like that. My love for London music was something I thought about interpreting into the way I reimagined this piece.
To be a part of Blue Note Reimagined album is an absolute honour. Kay Young from South London, like covering one of the biggest songs from one of the biggest legendary labels, it's humbling.
It feels great to be asked to reimagine this piece. I'm glad Blue Note trusted me. I feel honoured really to be able to give my take on an amazing piece of music by an incredible artist. One piece of musical advice I've never forgotten Funny enough, I've forgotten who said it. I think many musicians have said it, but take care of their music and their music will take care of you. Study the people that have come before you. That, for me, is part of taking care of the music. With that respect, good things will come to you.
I think the only thing I've done is kind of remain, you know, true to myself, to trust your voice and to be honest. And I think those are the three things that have got me to where I am today. I'm still learning, you know, to me, even being here is a shock. So I just feel like just be true, be honest, and trust your sound.
Thank you.
There we are, Blue Note Reimagined 2 is available now. Right, just before we leave you this evening, a final check on the weather. There is a chance of some heavy thundery showers moving up from the south tonight that may linger in places throughout the morning tomorrow, these clearing to sunny spells later on. Friday will continue to be rather wet with a band of thundery rain moving eastwards and falling heavy at times. Patchy cloud on Saturday, likely to be drier though, and temperatures in the high teens across the next few days. Temperatures overnight staying mild as well, still in the low to mid-teens at their best. And that's all for this evening. Thank you for watching. To keep up to date with news and events, do follow our social channels. You can find us in all the usual places at London Live. But from all of us here, have a lovely evening.